Well, so much for an easy Saturday afternoon at the office. Penn State does take care of business over
So the Sax out
closer than we would have hoped. Once again, Tim Aiden, Marty Leap from BlackShootDiaries.com. Marty, how are we doing, good sir?
I'm doing all right. That game was definitely a lot more stressful than it needed to be. A lot more stressful than it looked like it was going to be with the way Penn State just jumped all over Central Michigan early. But hey, you know what? I said this on Twitter at the end of the game, survive in advance. You're 4-0. No matter who you are, any Penn State fan, both of us included, would have gladly signed up for 4-0 to start the year when you consider two of those games were at Purdue and at Auburn. So, yeah, you're 4-0. You've got a Northwestern team coming to town that you should definitely handle. You've got a bye week, and then it's off to the big house. So, yeah, it's all things considered, I feel like Penn State's doing as best you possibly could ask for through 4 games.
Right, and to expect performances week in and week out like at Auburn would be very unrealistic. I mean, I gave that, if you read my position grades post on that on Black Sheep Diaries last week, I had a straight A report card. That's the first time I can ever recall giving the team a straight A report card since I've been doing the position grades post for the last 6 years at this point. So, but, and also just looking around, the early afternoon games, Georgia, they were only up 12-10 on Kent State in the second quarter at one point. Michigan they were losing to Maryland right before halftime. I think they took the lead right before halftime. But then, Maryland kept hanging around, and ultimately it came down to Michigan having to recover a onside kick in the final minutes in order to seal the deal. So, and then I just saw, we just watched that. Some of you, I'm sure, tuning in, watched that thriller of an overtime between Clemson and Wake Forest with the Tigers eking it out in 2 overtimes. So, it could be, it's one of those weekends, just, some slow starts, some top teams getting some scares against opponents you think they would be able to handle a little better. So, I mean, that's college football. And frankly, that's sports in general. If you ask me, you're not going to have your A game every single week, but I think a game like this, Marty, and you can tell me if you agree or not, but it's one of those I think sometimes the best wins are the ones where, you handle your business, but at the same time, there's enough, there were enough mistakes there that things that the coaches can really harp on and work on in the upcoming week of practice.
Yeah, without a doubt, it kind of goes two ways in that fold. On one hand, it's kind of like the starting pitcher who doesn't have his best stuff and still goes out there and gives you 6 strong innings. And that's kind of where Penn State was at today. They didn't play great, but they still handled business, won by 3 scores. And on the other hand, I remember this week, Tyler Donahue of Lions 247 mentioned this, where, if you're James Franklin, you might not totally hate if you kind of come out and have a subpar performance against Central Michigan, because after pounding Auburn, everyone's talking about how great you are. Everybody's reading the newspaper clippings. So, you might not totally hate to come out and play the way they did today, because it gives you something as a coach to hold over your team's head, some more motivation. Like, hey, we're not where we need to be yet. We just played this school out of the MAC, no disrespect to them, but we really kind of, him-hawed around with them. We were tied in the second quarter. Like, we got a lot to work on yet. So it might not be the end of the world for Penn State that they struggle the way they did today, because it will make it easier for the coaching staff, like you said, Tim, to kind of really hammer home to these players what they have yet to work on. So, yeah, there can be, as weird as it may sound, there can be positives that come out of a game like this. As someone who played football from the time I was in second grade through my senior year of high school, I can tell you there were years I was on teams that we would play teams we were much better than, and have performances like this. And your coaches would hammer that. There are things that can be learned. And sometimes, I mean, obviously you could be Alabama, you could be Ohio State, you could be Georgia. You always have things to work on, but it's easier for the players to see the things you have to work on coming out of a game like this than it is coming out of a 41-12 road win against an SEC team. So, it may prove to not be exactly the end of the world for Penn State, that they had to work a little bit harder today than they originally wanted to beat Central Michigan.
Right. And you just remind me of that famous Joe Paterno quote, you're never as good as you think you are when you win, never as bad as you think you are when you lose. Now, Penn State didn't lose, but it was certainly a more underwhelming win than, most of us were expecting. They jumped, but early on, it didn't seem like it was going to be that way. They jumped out to a 14-zip lead rather quickly. So it was midway for the first quarter. I don't know about you. I'm sitting there thinking, all right, this could be a nice, comfortable afternoon. Maybe they'll put this away by halftime. And they just hit a major lull. Offensively, they couldn't do much. And defensively, Central Michigan just started to shred them with a nice little balanced attack. And before we knew it, we were tied up at 14 and wondering what the heck is going on. Thankfully, Penn State did tack on a touchdown before halftime and retake the lead. But, I certainly did not. I was certainly hoping it would be better than 21-14 Penn State at the half, given how things had started.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe I jinxed things. If I did, I apologize. Early on in the game on Black Sheet Irish Twitter, I said, man, it's great to see Penn State come out. This was a real letdown spot. You're coming off a very emotional blowout road victory over an SEC squad. Next week, you welcome Northwestern to town to start Big Ten play in whole. And this had letdown written all over it. And Penn State came out and jumped all over. It's 14-0, 6-7 minutes into the game, whatever it was.
Yeah, something like that.
And you're thinking, okay, they're going to roll. And I said that on Twitter, and then Penn State started to just kind of sleepwalk a little bit. So, and that's part of what made it frustrating to me. Like, honestly, I would have been a lot less frustrated had Penn State come out falling behind early, kind of kicking that can around. But to jump out 14-0 and then find yourself in a dogfight was more frustrating to me than anything. But yeah, it was definitely a letdown spot. And to their credit, when the letdown opportunity let in, they didn't fold. They responded well. I will say probably my biggest concern coming out of this game defensively, the middle of the field, those crossing routes, things like that, they've got to get that cleaned up. Purdue exploited it. Central Michigan exploited it at times today. You better believe that, Jim Harbaugh and Ryan Day are seeing this and salivating at the mouth. So they got to get that cleaned up. But yeah, let's all in all, they're 4-0. No one, I think very few people expect them to be 4-0. I think even the most optimistic Penn State fans probably were saying, hey, no, if we're 3-1 coming out of that Central Michigan game, we'll take it. I think you and I both would have said, hey,
that was my preseason prediction.
Yeah, you and I both
be 3-1 after September. So
yeah, coming into the year, I thought they'd go 9-3. I figured lose to Michigan, lose to Ohio State, and lose one of the two to Auburn or Purdue. So to beat both Auburn and Purdue, hey, they are what they are. This is a year two of your college football outside of Georgia, Ohio State, and Alabama. Is there really a great team? Probably not. So you're looking at a Penn State team that is going to be 4-0. There's a legitimate argument to be made to put them in the top 10, just because who else you're going to rank there. But yeah, you're 4-0. You need to get that middle of the defense cleaned up. Those crossing routes, things of that nature, are going to hurt you moving forward, especially against Michigan, against Ohio State. But yeah, things could be a lot worse for Penn State right now than they are. And I would rather be 4-0 with some minor things that need to clean up on defense than be 2-2 or 3-1. So yeah, you'll take that all day long.
Oh, absolutely. I'll say, I think, I guess we've talked about how they got killed in the passing game from the crossing routes, but I was also though impressed we talked about this before we hit record, the whole Manny Diaz experience. Yeah, you're going to give up your share of big plays, but they're also going to come up with some big plays, and they certainly did today. 4 turnovers, 2 interceptions, and then 2 fumble recovery. One of them came off a muff punt on special teams, which we can get into that too, because that was maybe a mixed bag, but they certainly came up clutch too when they needed to. But yeah, 4 turnovers, and as maddening as it is to see them sometimes not wrap up or not bring guys down when they should, it's also just as beautiful to see them just cleanly pick off a pass that looked like it was gonna be caught, or just get some pressure on the quarterback and make him make a bad throw, which leads to an interception. So I'd say right now, defense probably probably what we can really hope for at this point. And you see the pressure we got from the D line as well was promising. Obviously, Chop Robinson, denied Dennis Sutton, granted in garbage time, but he seems to be coming along more and more each and every week. So it'd be nice to have him get thrown more into the mix especially as you get into that mid-season, especially when we get into that 3-game gauntlet in October at Michigan, Minnesota, and Ohio State at home. It certainly to have another pass rusher like him to go with Chop and Adisa Isaac would go a long ways.
Yeah, I think the Sutton the last 2 weeks, we've really seen him start to kind of hit his stride. He's a kid from McDonough, same high school, as Curtis Jacobs, same high school as PJ Mustafer. And as we've seen in the past of those guys, Devon Ellis as well also went to McDonough. But as we've seen in the past of those guys, McDonough does not allow their players to graduate early. I feel like if Dennis Sutton could have enrolled in January, we'd already see a huge impact from him on the field. And really, the thing about we've seen it, 3 games in, he's got 2 sacks already. Like, the kid is a baller. Like you said, Tim, if you can get Dennis Sutton going, along with Adisa Isaac, along with Chop Robinson, along with Curtis Jacobs blitzing, along with those defensive tackles, this pass rush has been very good this year. I know fans are frustrated out today. The pass rush didn't always get home. But we saw it at times today where you don't have to sack the quarterback to have an effective pass rush. Look at Zakee Wheatley's interception, for example. Richardson is under all kinds of pressure, heaves it up, Wheatley picks it off. Even that the one touchdown Central Michigan scored with that Hogan guy, rolled it in, and looking like Hulk Hogan out there on the field, like pulling in this amazing one-handed catch. Like, if not for a tremendous effort by Hogan, it's incomplete. Why was it incomplete? Because Richardson's getting drilled as he throws the ball. If you're getting in the quarterback's face, you're forcing bad throws, that's an effective pass rush, even without the sack. And we've seen that so far this year. So if Dennis Sutton can take a step forward, which he seems to be doing, this gives you a really good pass rush. And I forget who it was this week. It was it was either Donahue of 247 Sports, who I mentioned, or Sean Fitz now of On 3, who on their podcast was talking that they had spoke to someone in the program who they were talking about, the Katron Allen, the next thing going to the Drew Alar hype trains full steam ahead. They said they felt like this was going to be the week where Dennis Sutton put his hype train full steam ahead. And he very well may have done that because, he mentioned he got the sack. He was blowing plays up down the field, making tackles. Yeah. And it's just as crazy as it sounds to the recruiting doesn't matter folks out there. You look at Penn State's freshmen this year who've made the impacts. Nick Singleton, 5-star. Drew Alar, 5-star. Dennis Sutton, 5-star. Katron Allen, high 4-star, top 100 overall prospect. So, yeah, it's just crazy how these kids who are 5-star or top 100 prospects in high school tend to make a big impact right off the bat in college. And we're seeing it so far for Penn State this year.
I meant to, that catch Hogan made to score at Central Michigan's touchdown. I mean, he also had to regain his balance. It seemed like he stumbled a bit. I didn't think he was going to just turn around and be able to corral the ball the way he did. And frankly, I would say I was impressed with Central Michigan's receivers as a whole. I mean, I lost count just how many acrobatic catches they made. There's only so much you can do to defend that.
Yep. And that was one thing I mentioned both in our Black Sheet Irish chat and a couple other group chats I'm in with Penn State fans. It was, Central Michigan's receivers and tight ends made absolutely every single play today, and kudos to them. There was 4 or 5 times Penn State's in perfect coverage, and these guys are going full extension, one-handed grabs, bobbling the ball. Like you said, Tim, there's only so much you can do defensively. Again, outside of that middle of that field, I'm not really concerned about anything with the defense coming out of this game. And I know we've kind of hinted at it a little bit. The Mandy has experience. You're going to give up some big plays, but if for every 2 big plays I give up, I'm forcing 2 or 3 turnovers, I'll take that trade-off. And that's what we've seen this year. Penn State's I think plus 9 or 10 now in the turnover differential. And I understand turnovers aren't always sustainable. And you and I kind of talked about this for coming on the air, but when you're forcing turnovers as opposed to turnovers kind of being handed to you, that's totally different. That's what we're seeing for Penn State. Kalen King today, rips the ball out of the wide receiver's hand and picks it up. You're forcing that. When you're hitting a quarterback as he throws the ball, so it's a terrible throw and a turn getting picked off, you're forcing that. And you and I talked about this too. You look at Iowa last year, the big difference between Penn State and Iowa is Iowa's offense relied on those turnovers for short field. Penn State's offense, for as much as they have struggled at times this year, has shown the ability to drive the length of the field when they need to. So I don't think it's as big of a red flag as often would be for a team to live off turnovers as much as Penn State has. So yeah, it's the Manny Diaz experience, man. And I will say, moving forward into Big Ten play, this defense is the least of my concerns, because even if they get beat on some crossing routes, rather it be a Blake Corum, rather it be Travion Henderson, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Roman Wilson, whoever it might be, I have no doubts that push come to shove, they're going to be tough against the run. Their pass rush is going to get home and force bad throws. And yeah, I think the defense is going to be just fine.
Yeah, I'd still say the defense is probably the least of my worries, at least compared to special teams and offense. Although special teams, get to that right now. They were mixed bag. I on the one hand, though, they did play a big role, I think, and they probably were responsible for 2 of Penn State's touchdowns. It was 1 point, I believe it was, I can't remember when it was in the game. It was a tie game. I think it was a tie game. Penn State had punted, but they also pinned Central Michigan like deep inside their own territory, like inside their own 5. And they ended up forcing 3 and out. They get the ball back. They get a nice little punt return, I think, like well into Central Michigan territory. They end up scoring a touchdown before halftime. So they're up to their back ahead instead of tied at the half, which was clutch. And then later on, it was still was a 20, I think it was a 27-14 game. Or no, I guess it was 21-14. Because they had it was the first, after the first possession of the second half. I remember now they weren't able to score, so they punt. But then, the returner for Central Michigan muffs a punt. Curtis Jacobs is all over that thing, like white on rice, and sets up Penn State 1st and goal inside the Central Michigan 10, which of course they convert that to an easy touchdown. So and I put them up 27-14 at that point because of the blocked extra points. And there's also, Jake Pinegar, of course, he missed on a 38-yard field goal later in the game, which didn't hurt Penn State at that point because they were up 33-14 in the final few minutes of the game. Of course, it's a concern when, Pinegar, he nailed a clutch field goal at Auburn last week. Definitely got to give him all the credit in the world for that. So that's the one that you could maybe argue helped open the floodgates, because it went from a 21-6, 2-score game to 24-6, and now you need 3 touchdowns and all of them having successful 2-point conversions just to tie the game. So did a great job there. But then once again, bad Pinegar showed up this week. So the concern here is just really I think the concern is more the kicking game. The punting game's been great, but just obviously when the kicking game is that inconsistent, it's hard not to feel like it could very well cost them a game or 2 down the line in Big Ten play.
Yeah, you mentioned the special teams, and man, Barney Amore has been an absolute weapon. I was texting my buddy Adam about this earlier, and it's pretty crazy to go back to Blake Gillikin starting in 2016, how consistently not just good, but like weaponized Penn State's punt teams have been. I know James Franklin's first 2 years here, his punters, no offense to the Daniel Pescarellos and Alex Butterworths of the world, were horrible. And it's almost as if he said, I'm never going to let this happen again. But yeah, Barney Amore has been awesome this year, probably directly responsible for definitely at least 1, if not 2, Penn State touchdowns today. And you mentioned the kicking game, and it's weird with Jake Pinegar. Coming into the year, I had very little faith in Jake Pinegar. I still agree with you. I think he probably cost them at least 1 game at some point this year. That said, when he's needed to be clutch, against Purdue and the game's tight on extra points, against Auburn, hitting big field goals, a lot of them pull away, he's nailing it. And then against Ohio and Central Michigan, where it's almost like Pinegar needs that pressure or something. It's crazy. Because if you look at the 2 games this year where they really needed him to come through in the clutch and hit big pressurized kicks, he did. And then the 2 games against Ohio and Central Michigan where he could probably afford to, not be great, he hasn't been. So, hey, you know what? If he can continue that, great. But
I'll take that kind of inconsistent. If we can't be consistent, then I'll take that kind of inconsistency any day.
exactly. And you even kind of go back to 2019 with Penninger. I remember against Minnesota early in the game hitting like a 48-yard kick, and it was kind of the same way where when pressurized, he's hitting the kicks. When there's no pressure, he struggles. But yeah, I'm with you. I still think that probably will prove to cost them something somewhere. Most likely in that 3-week stretch of Michigan, Minnesota, and Ohio State. Because to be honest, even with what we've seen from Maryland, I think outside of that 3-week stretch, I have a hard time seeing them losing any of their games the rest of the way. Michigan State, who is currently already in a deep hole and quick against Minnesota, looks like they are just not good this year. But yeah, I think that 3-week stretch of Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio State, I won't be surprised if Pinegar cost them at least one of those games. But yeah, hey, I will take a kicker who his numbers are inconsistent, but it's because he's great under pressure and then struggles in games that you win by 3 scores than the alternative any day.
Absolutely. Before we get on to talking about the offense, I just want to thank everyone who's liked and subscribed to this channel already. If you haven't, if you're your first time watching, welcome. This is our weekly live postgame show Marty and I do after every Penn State game here on the Voice of College Football. We're currently at 531 subscribers. Was hoping to hit 550 by next week, October 1st. And it's lofty goal, but I still think we can do it. So if you haven't already and you like what you see, please like and subscribe to us. And also, don't forget, on the main Voice of College Football channel, Mark Rogers himself will have his weekly Saturday night call-in show beginning at 11:30 p.m. Eastern time tonight. So check that out as well if you get the chance. Go on to the offense, Marty. So it was a mixed bag. Sean Clifford got off to a nice start, connected on his first 8 passes. And you look at the stat line, 3 touchdown passes, no interceptions. So that's good. But after that hot start, he definitely cooled off significantly, especially after he took a couple of hits. And I know you and I, and probably most people in the Slack channel, were saying, when's Drew Hour coming in? Let's give him a shot. And Hour did finally come in, in the early fourth quarter. And it was mixed bag for me. Had one nice throw for a first down, then couldn't land a couple of deeper balls, which, part of that's maybe on him, but also just on, just the receiver not being able to come up with the catch. And it kind of brings another point too. The receivers, mixed bag. Just they had some nice catches. They did score some touchdowns, but there's also some drops. Just it was kind of it was a so-so performance. It was good enough to get by a team like Central Michigan, but they're gonna have to be more on point going forward now that we're getting into Big Ten play. But man, running back, I'll say for the struggles Nick Singleton had, and I guess he was bound to have a down game, but Katron Allen, heck of a job picking up his slack. 13 carries, 111 yards, and a touchdown. So he definitely had some nice runs thrown in there. And again, they saw the difference when they were able to get the run game going, and Central Michigan wasn't able to just tee off on Cliff and the receivers.
Yeah, I mean, the emergence of this running game probably has been the biggest thing to me, at least, to come out of the early part of the season here for Penn State. You mentioned Katron Allen today going over 100 yards. Penn State's after not getting a 100-yard rusher once all last season. Penn State's a 100-yard rusher in 3 games in a row. Nick Singleton, not his best performance, but still averaged almost 4 yards a carry. So, not exactly bad. And Penn State as a whole, ran for 166 yards today, but you take away
about saving money.
You take away yardage, that they lost on between a kneel down and a Drew Lar sack. You take those aside, they averaged 5.9 yards a carry today. And to me, what's impressive about going from 5.9 yards a carry, even though it's Central Michigan, the offensive line did not pass blocking wise, offensive line was terrific. Run blocking wise, the offensive line did not have its best game. And even while struggling to get a push, struggling to generate that for the running game, still averaged almost 6 yards a carry. And run adjusted stats outside of sacks and kneel downs. So hey, you'll take that. That's pretty solid. It's just I think it goes a long way for this team. The quarterback play, that is a conversation we could probably have a whole hour-long episode on in itself. But Sean Clifford against Auburn did not have to do much. And a big reason he didn't have to do much was because the running game was really good. And that kind of helped protect Clifford. Today, Clifford was asked a little bit more and struggled at times for the running game got going. So I think ultimately moving forward, if Sean Clifford is going to be your QB1, you need the running game to work. I understand there are a lot of like diehard Sean Clifford fans out there in the Penn State fan base. He is what he is. As someone in our former colleague of ours, the Black Shoe Diaries, Clay Sauerteig, will point this out to me all the time. Me, as someone who's a fan of the Penn State Nittany Lions and the Minnesota Vikings, I can't get away from like overly aggressive average quarterback play between Sean Clifford and Kirk Cousins. They're very similar quarterbacks, and you have them as your quarterback. You're doing better than most teams, but are you ever going to win a championship? Probably not. So yeah, if Penn State, I think this is a Penn State team that has the tools to make a lot of noise this year. Quarterback play is going to be important to that. And if Sean Clifford's going to be your quarterback, instead of Drew Lar, you need to get that running game going. And to their credit, through 4 games, that running game has been working. I think a big part of that is freshman running backs. And I know this is kind of the long vision view, but man, this offense in 2023 and 2024 with a large quarterback, with Allen and Singleton as running backs, the weapons will have a tight end and wide receiver. It could be a lot of fun. And I will say, speaking of tight end, we're on it. Brenton Strange came into this year in dire need of a big season, and he has improved tenfold with his catching and not dropping the ball. He's improved tenfold with his blocking. Kudos to Brenton Strange, who 4 weeks into the season is looking like a first-team all-conference tight end, leads the conference in both receiving yards and receiving touchdowns for tight ends. Just big tip of the cap to Brenton Strange. Also tight ends coach Ty Howell, the former Penn State offensive lineman, who's under a lot of heat coming into the season because his group really has turned it around. And it's been with Theo Johnson, who's probably the most talented tight end in the room, being basically a non-factor because of injury through 4 games. So yeah, big tip of the cap to that group, especially Brenton Strange, for having a really great start to the season.
Absolutely. I was going to say, if you didn't mention, I was going to mention Brenton Strange had himself a day, 5 catches, 42 yards, a pair of touchdowns. But he's really, and his blocking, I'll say that's one thing that's probably improved the most out of anything else. His blocking has been superb in the run game, so he's like becoming more and more of a complete package for Penn State. And that's what you want out of your tight end. So it's really great to see. Maybe he needs to work on his hurdling skills a bit. He tried to hurdle the Chippewa defender and kind of, his crotch kind of hit the player's helmet, so he just tumbled over. But
real quick at the hurdle, I'm not a huge Matt Millen fan on commentary, which is unfortunate because he's a Penn State guy. But one comment he made today was very accurate. He goes, if you're going to hurdle a player, make sure you clear them, because I can't imagine taking a helmet where he took a helmet as someone who was lucky enough to never have that happen in their youth / high school football career. I can't imagine that feels good.
I gotta imagine you guys wear cups though, don't you?
No, I always did, and I always tell my kids, football and baseball both, wear a cup. You might not need it, but if you don't wear it, you'll need it. Always wear the cup.
It's like one taking your umbrella on a cloudy day. Like, just do it. If they're calling for 40-50% rain, just bring it, because the time that you don't bring it is when it's going to start pouring. Just like with the cups. So Yeah, I guess we got a little sidetracked with protecting your important parts there, but that's. But yeah, it's one of. But yeah, the offensive performance was definitely something that can obviously be improved upon. So, and I wondered, I guess what I'm thinking to myself, Mari, do you think the offense? Do you think it's more like what we saw at Auburn last week, or what we saw today, or do you think it's something maybe in between those two performances?
I mean, I definitely think it's probably somewhere in between. I think with Auburn, in a lot of ways, that was the team quitting once you kind of got up on them. Central Michigan, it's Central Michigan. They're 1-3, but they're a MAC team. I know I was very critical of it as the game went on, but if you're a MAC team whose head coach is Jim McElwain honestly might be the best head coach, other than, in my opinion, other than maybe Gus Malzahn and Kalani Sitake in terms of non-Power 5 head coaches. I mean, he's a guy who took Florida to like 3 straight SEC title games. Like, Jim McElwain's not a bum of a coach. He knows what he's doing. He learned under Nick Saban. He was head coach in the SEC and had a lot of success as a head coach in the SEC. So that has a factor in here too. But yeah, it's never as easy as it seems on the surface in college football or any sport for that matter. But Jim McElwain's a guy. If I'm facing a Jim McElwain coach team, I'm never going to expect that team to quit. I'm never going to expect that team to give up. And that's what we saw today. Like I said, I think the performance of this offense, is it better than what we saw today? Absolutely. Is it as flawless as we saw against Auburn? Probably not. But if you meet somewhere in the middle, you're probably looking at averaging like 35 points a game more times than not. That's going to win you the game you're playing.
Absolutely. And just what, like I said, this is a good game for them to come out with the win, but also, like I said, maybe it wasn't necessarily a bad thing if they have a subpar performance. At least it'll give the coaches things to harp on during practice this coming week. And also, maybe I'm not accusing any of one particular player, but I'm sure it was hard for them to not get caught up in the hype coming off and the praise they were getting coming off the Auburn game. I know as a fan, man, I mean, I couldn't stop watching the highlights from the Auburn game. I couldn't stop reading, articles or just, comments from people just like college football pundits just singing Penn State's praises and how, oh, this is these guys are a Big Ten title contender. Look out for Penn State. So maybe it's not necessarily a bad thing if they get brought back down to earth a little bit. So, they realize, all right, well, yeah, maybe you still can win the comp, but if you bring an effort like you did today, that's not going to get it done. So hopefully they'll take some lessons going forward. And we're the portion. That's it for Marty and I's comments on the game itself. But I do see we got some questions and comments from you folks, so we will address those now. First of all, I got Ike asks, should the game against Northwestern come as easy as it looks on paper? I still think I don't know if there's a line that's come out yet. I still think it's a game Penn State should win fairly handily. And I think now, especially if they had their struggles against Central Michigan, they'll probably be more determined to come out and make sure they pummel from the start and not let the foot off the gas like they seem to do after getting off to a hot start. What about you, Marty?
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. You come out a hot start, like we mentioned, against Central Michigan, and they kind of hem-haw around. Next thing you know, it's 14-14. So I'm hoping it's a Northwestern team that, I'm not convinced at all that Northwestern's offense is better than Central Michigan's. Come out and bury them, man. Jump up 20-0, 21-0, put them away. Because if you're Penn State, come out next weekend, you take care of Northwestern, 35-10, 35-7, something like that, like everyone's expecting. You go into your bye week of 5-0 and head to the big house. It could be setting up for a really special season for Penn State. So I think next week, it could be like today. I think next week's worst case scenario is similar to today's game. You might be tied in the second quarter, but did anyone ever actually think Penn State was going to lose this game? No. Everyone knew how long they were going to win. I think next week could be similar to where, second quarter, it's 10-3, it's 14-6, something like that. But you're like, all right, Penn State's not going to lose this game. So yeah, I think on paper, score wise, it might not be an easy game, but feel of the game where you're just kind of rolling along, it'll be an easy game. They'll take care of Northwestern and they'll be 5-0.
I would think so as well. And remember, this is the same Northwestern team that they lost to Southern Illinois at home last week. And gosh, I think they turned it over a few times, and Southern Illinois just seemed to be able to move the ball at will on Northwestern. They beat Nebraska in the season opener, but I mean, you see Nebraska is probably the worst team in the Big Ten right now, and maybe Northwestern's the second worst at this point. Similar to today, I would be shocked if they actually did lose, but yeah, you're just hoping maybe it's not a game where it's closer, longer than it should be. So hopefully they'll be able to put them away sooner next week, and you just see a more consistent bounce back. What I also want to see is Nick Singleton get his groove back, and that's something I kind of forgot to talk about a bit. There's some discussion in our Slack channel about Katron Allen maybe is the best back we got right now because he's able to see the hole better and just knows where to hit it. Whereas Singleton, you give him a clear path, he'll run right through that. But maybe he doesn't quite see things as clearly as Katron does.
Yeah, I was talking to a buddy of mine throughout the game who he's more of an NFL fan than college fan. So he'll watch a lot of Penn State football, but he'll kind of look at it from the NFL lens. And we were talking about Nick Singleton. I told him one of the things that really is plaguing Singleton now is I feel like he's still too much of that high school mode where I bounce outside, I can run past everybody. Where Allen isn't. I think a lot of that comes from Katron Allen playing at IMG Academy in Florida against the best of the best, as opposed to Nick Singleton running all over random ass defenses from high school teams in Pennsylvania. I have no doubt Penn State has two studs in their hands at running back. As we've mentioned, I think this offense the next 2 years with Alar and Singleton and Allen could be a lot of freaking fun. And we could really see Penn State take a big step forward as a program the next couple of seasons with that group. But yeah, I agree. I think right now Allen is the better quote unquote running back than Singleton. Well, Singleton's the better all around athlete and just freak of a prospect. But yeah, it's, you know what? I'd rather have both those guys on my team though than have to choose between them. I can tell you that.
Oh, no doubt. And hopefully this is just maybe an off game for Nick. And I wondered too if probably obviously the Central Michigan staff was watching the game film from last week, and my guess is they were probably focused on making sure Nick Singleton didn't bust one loose on them. But maybe it didn't count.
It did seem like from early in the game, Central Michigan had 7-8 guys in the box. They seemed very committed to containing Nick Singleton from the get-go, which I think was also a factor in the game he had.
I got another comment from Joey. Clifford can't throw a deep route. He had wide open multiple times in this game. There were definitely some throws that Cliff should have made, and maybe Drew Auer probably does make those, which is why we're clamoring for him to come in sooner than he did. But also at the same time, the receiver, I can't pin all of the pass game issues on Cliff. There were some throws he had that should have been caught by the receivers. So it was kind of, the blame goes for both groups. Thankfully they did enough when they needed to win without having us sweat it out the entire game. So there is that. Just a quick look around the rest of the Big Ten. Minnesota's went up 7 on a field goal, 17-0 on Michigan State, but what's even more shocking is the stat line: 227 total yards for Minnesota right now to just 1 for Sparty. And I'm a little surprised. I thought Michigan State could at least move the ball a bit. And Minnesota, they lost their top receiver, Chris Autman-Bell, for the year to an injury last week. And so he figured, all right, they're going to have to lean even more on the run game of Mo Ibrahim, who so far has had a good game. He's got, 42 yards and 10 carries and a touchdown. So he's been doing pretty well himself. Then you also got Indiana down 10-3 now 17-3 at Cincinnati. No surprise there. You had Michigan, who I mentioned earlier, they were struggling with Maryland early on. But then they eventually took over a bit. But Maryland, to their credit, they hung around to the end. So, that Maryland game, obviously it's definitely going to be an interesting one when they come to Happy Valley in mid-November. Who knows where both teams will be at that point? But how do you see? How does this change your assessment for playing Michigan in a few weeks? Like, okay, maybe that it kind of confirms things. Maybe that defense obviously still good enough, but they're surely missing David Ojabo and Aiden Hutchinson, along with other key guys they've lost from last year.
Yeah, I don't think what happened today really changes anything how I view the Michigan game, because this game went as I expected. I thought Maryland would come in, move the ball, score some points, because Michigan had not faced a team with even half a pulse all year. Right now, if they were playing tomorrow, I would pick Michigan to win, but I would pick a close game, 24-20, something like that. I think Penn State's capable of beating Michigan without a doubt. I think Penn State's defense is probably better than Michigan's. I just think Michigan's offense is a little bit more well-tuned at this point with what Jim Harbaugh wants to do. But yeah, this game doesn't really change my outlook. But a lot of that is because the game went exactly as I anticipated it. Now, if you want to talk about Michigan State, that's a bit of a different story. If Penn State cannot, they're even years when Penn State has been good and Michigan State's been pretty average, Penn State has struggled with Michigan State for whatever reason, and it's extremely frustrating. I will say if Penn State cannot find a way to beat Michigan State this year, I probably will pull every hair out of my head out because that team is terrible. But it's Penn State, Michigan State. If that game winds up some sort of 17-4
Land-Grant Trophy, Marty,
would you expect anything less?
Expect the unexpected in Land-Grant Trophy game.
You expect blizzards and lightning delays and weird stuff, because that's what happens when Penn State plays Michigan State. But no, I think Penn State is a much better team than Michigan State this year. I think Penn State, I'm still the belief Ohio State's the best team in the Big Ten, but I think Penn State and Michigan are very clearly head and shoulders above every other team in the Big Ten outside of Ohio State. So yeah, I think this will be, again, if I don't feel any different about the Michigan game, still a coin flip game to me, probably lean Michigan just because it's in Ann Arbor. But if they lose to Michigan State, I probably will have, whenever you guys see us doing the post-game show for that, if my hat's not on, I will have no hair left, because I will have pulled it out that they found a way to lose to a team that is just horrible, absolutely horrible. And, I one other quick comment on Michigan State. Mel Tucker has really ridden the transfer portal since he's gotten there. And I think we're seeing this season where that is not sustainable. He has recruited well also, don't get me wrong. But if Mel Tucker cannot continue to recruit well, as Peyton Thorne just threw an interception with Michigan State trailing 17-0, you can't ride the transfer portal the way. Yeah, you can be a Penn State where, hey, we need a defensive end, let's get Chop Robinson. I need a receiver, let's get Mitch Tinsley. But you can't expect to form, half your starters out of the portal the way Mel Tucker has and find success.
Yeah, I like I said, I think the whole transfer portal, you live by the portal, we die by the portal, and it's right now they're dying by it. We'll see. They definitely need to make sure they're doing the best they can getting high school kids, and then using the portal just to supplement whatever.
Yeah,
deficiencies.
just because they caught lightning in a bottle with Kenneth Walker does not mean they can live and die by the portal and find success the way they have.
Right. Yes, Mike with the comments. I agree. Thrashing Sparty, no way.
You're right, Mike.
Yeah, I hope you're right. So fingers crossed. Last but not least, around the Big Ten, got a Wisconsin, Ohio State tonight, 7:30 on ABC. Buckeyes a 19-point favorite as of right now. Do you think that's if you were betting on this, who would you put your money on to cover?
I think Wisconsin covers. It's Wisconsin. You know what you're getting for them. They're going to run the ball. They're going to play good defense. They're going to look to shorten the game. Paul Chryst, very good coach. I think Wisconsin covers. I think the Buckeyes win. They probably win by double digits, but I still think Wisconsin covers. 35-20, 31-17, something like that. I think they cover 19 points, but I still think the Buckeyes probably win pretty comfortably.
I kind of think it could resemble something like the Notre Dame Ohio State game where, Wisconsin keeps it tight. Maybe they're leading for a brief bit, perhaps even ahead at halftime. Who knows? But they just don't quite have, similar to Notre Dame, they just don't have the offensive firepower to keep up. I mean, Ohio State's they're going to get their points one way or another. And your offense had better be able to do the same if you want to have a chance to knock off these guys. So yeah, if I were a betting man, I think I would take the Badgers to cover, but I'm thinking like a probably 14-point Ohio State win in the end. So that does about it. Mike's got some more comments. Merck says it's referring to Graham Mertz, Wisconsin quarterback. His cold streaks in their defense is a paper tiger. I guess we'll find out about the defense. But yeah, Mertz. Yeah, we know firsthand from watching Penn State play Wisconsin last year. He's definitely got his cold streaks. But we shall see. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in. Just remember blacksheepdiaries.com. Currently, we have got our three takeaways. Our fine manager, Jared Slanina, has got that. Ellie Moretta Felice, who many of you know, who's hosted here at times when one of us is not available. He's got the game recap up. And Marty, you will have your Twitter reactions post tomorrow.
No, it's currently scheduled for 7 p.m. tonight. So you will see it here in about 2 hours and 20-ish minutes on the East Coast. Or I guess anywhere, but yeah, about 2 hours and 20 minutes from now it'll be live.
Then I will have my usual Sunday position grades post, and then Monday will be the turning point post, in which I talk about a particular play or moment from the game that seemed to permanently turn the tide in Penn State's favor, or if it's a loss, which turn a tide for the other team's favor. So keep an eye out for those. And as always, once football season's coming to a close, we don't stop at blacksheepdiaries.com. We got plenty of basketball coverage, hockey, wrestling, especially with being so dominant as they are, like Bama style dominance. Got some excellent wrestling writers. So be sure to check us out year round. Of course, right now, but just year round. So, and if you haven't already, like what you see, please hit that like and subscribe button here on the Penn State Voice of College Football channel. Thank you all for tuning in once again, and we will see you all next week.